Okay, excellent. Rob, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Stern. I'm the Associate Director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, a psychoanalyst in private practice, the author of the book, The Gaslight Effect, and the mother of Scott and Melissa, who are both adults living in New York and healthy right now, thankfully, and living their own lives.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. And good morning, everybody. My name is Marc Brackett, and I'm the director of the center and also a professor in the Child Studies Center at Yale. And Robin and I are just delighted to be with you again. I know that some of you may have strong feelings from last week just because you couldn't get into our webinar. And we're just beyond delighted that there's so much interest in this work, but also disappointed, that we can only handle so many people on these webinars, and uh, we're we're changing things as we learn. And anyhow, we're just delighted to be here with you so that we can do this live with you and answer some questions. And you get the revision because Rob and I have had the opportunity to review what we did last week and enhance it. So maybe we can get started by getting settled in our seats. Just take a nice long inhale and an exhale. And on the bottom of the screen, before we move to our presentation, you can see information about Robin's and my social media handles. Those are our names and ruler, our hashtags, and you'll also be able to see Instagram accounts, as well as websites where you can learn more information. Before we jump into the heart of our talk, what I wanted to share was that what we're going to be talking about today is a component of the larger system that our center has been building for the last 20 or so years, which we call Ruler. Ruler is an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning that has now been adopted by over 2,300 schools across across the United States and in other countries. And what we are most proud of is that we are trying to infuse the principles of social and emotional learning and emotional intelligence into the fabric of schools. While we can't teach you all of Ruler in a webinar, if you're interested in learning more about the approach, which is for school leaders and teachers and students and families, please just go to the rulerapproach.org website. And just to give you some forward-looking opportunities, the strategy of Ruler is that it is for all stakeholders. We provide schools with adult, professional, and personal learning. It's preschool all the way to high school. We have an online platform with digital tools and coaching support, and we even help schools do that monitoring and evaluation that is so necessary. The four areas that we focus on, which will come into today's presentation through the focus on emotion management, is that we're trying to get people to shift their mindsets about feelings, that they matter, that they're useful information, not to be suppressed or repressed, but to be used wisely. The second is that we focus on deepening people's SEL skills. Today, we're going to focus on emotion regulation, in particular, the co-regulation components of that for working with children. The setting level pieces of our work focus on building healthier climates. So right now we're going to focus on a healthy home climate, but our work is also about promoting or creating healthy school climates and district level office climates. And then lastly, the idea of infusing, I think Robin, you got to mute for a little bit just because of Robin's in New York City and there are sirens in the background. I'm in New Haven. I don't even know if anybody's around. So the last piece is something to think about, whether you're at work or at home, is that a big part of our work is infusing these principles into teaching practices, parenting practices, and policies. That may be a home policy, home rules, or school rules. So on that note, what we're going to do is jump into the content of today, and Robin's going to lead us off.
So we like to always start with a quote. that's near and dear to our hearts. And Maya Angelou is one of our favorite poets. Here's the quote. We'd love for you to listen to it. I'll read it through twice and then share with us what resonates with you about this quote. As you grow older, you'll discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others. I'll read it once more. As you grow older, you will discover you have two hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others. What does it mean to you?
Nikki, maybe you can just read some of the responses, please.
Okay, and just to make sure people are actually typing into the chat box with your ideas here.
Yes.
So self-care, being kind to others and to ourselves. I must not use both hands for others. I need to also help myself. We become less self-centered as we go through life experiences. One must take care of him or herself before they take care of others. Sometimes I take care of everyone else and forget to take care of myself. Put on your own oxygen mask first and help others. Balance.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you so much.
Co-regulation and self-regulation.
Thanks, Nikki. So, as many of you know, we also start most of our webinars, our meetings. Some of us do this at dinner. Some of us do this at the end of the day with checking in. And the mood meter is one of the signature tools of the Center for Emotional Intelligence and Ruler. And many of you may be familiar with it, but for those of you who are not, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds teaching it. X-axis is pleasantness. So right now, all of you are feeling some degree of pleasantness. -5, you're having thoughts of, like, I just don't want to be here today. I don't really want to participate. +5, you're having thoughts like, oh my goodness, an hour with Marc and Robin to talk about feelings. There's nothing better than that. Anybody there? On the energy side, think about your energy right now. Like, just do a scan of your body. What's your body saying to you? Do you feel full of energy, or do you feel depleted of energy? +5 would mean that you have so much energy you can't contain yourself. -5, oh, you're just so tired and exhausted. Please take a moment and plot yourself. How are you feeling? Got some, Nikki, you want to read off some of the words?
Middle of the road, quite calm, in the red, tired, yellow, peaceful, kind of all over the place here. A little bit of few people in every quadrant, I think. Relaxed, depleted, motivated, calm, orange between the quadrants, accepting, emotional turmoil, tired, sad.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And so you can imagine here, Robin and I are as your co-trainers, teachers today, and we've got a big class of hundreds of people who are feeling lots of different emotions. So maybe I can ask all of you to just take a moment and maybe take a breath. That's helpful for you. Got lots of words, lots of feelings right now, as you can see here. What's going to support you for the next hour with us? How can you get the most out of our webinar? And just maybe set a goal or an intention. And as you know, life is a roller coaster ride. You know, I think about this morning. So we adopted 2 puppies. This is my Corona strategy. We got 2, not 1, 2 9-week-olds, and also been living at home for the first time, like not the first time living at home, but 6-7 weeks now, not going anywhere. So this morning alone, you know, the dog started, you know, crying around 5 o'clock in the morning. They wanted to be cuddled. They wanted to get up, and then we got down, and then had coffee, and then I felt better, and then they were fighting, and then I was angry, and then I was irritable, and then I'm like, why are we doing this? So literally, I think I've had about 150 different feelings um, between 5 a.m. and now it is around 11:10 or so. Um, think about that. How about you, Robin? Have you had you been even keeled, or where have you been?
Actually, this morning I was really looking forward to the webinar and just feeling pretty upbeat all day, except for when I was exercising, where I was in the red because I was very frustrated that I couldn't do it the way I wanted to do it. So I woke up in the green, went into the red, maybe a little blue that, gee, I'm not where I want to be exercise wise, and then went back into the green. And of course, yellow when I got on and saw the participants and you, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Robin. I feel the same. I actually feel really focused and energized right now, which is good for me, at least for helping you in co-running this webinar. What I wanted to share with everybody was that roller coaster ride has had some like serious height in terms of, you know, how high up in the red quadrant people have been rolling. And this is a study that we did in collaboration with Castle. And what we found was that among 5,000 people across the United States, we've got a lot of anxiety, we've got a lot of nervousness, frustration, and overwhelm. And so my hunch is that many of you are resonating with that. What we also did, which is kind of cool, is we asked parents to report in a more recent study about the feelings of their children. So this is a study of around 500 families here on the East Coast between New York and Connecticut and Jersey probably. And what we found was that parents are saying their kids are anxious too, but we're also seeing frustration, boredom, and some happiness. So, and some sadness. Uh, Point being is that it looks like um, that we've got a lot of people, you know, in that anxiety and stress category. And just briefly, you know, what we wanted to share today was a review of what does it mean in our brains, in our bodies, and our behavior, you know, when we're feeling this way. And so just quickly, anxiety and stress, we know, has to do with feeling like things are unpredictable right now. You know, if you watch the news for more than 10 minutes a day, you get repeated information that makes you feel like everybody has a different story. There's no predictability around this. That is uncontrollable. Like, you know, people are talking about the sun and the heat, and then it doesn't work, and then it does work. Like, we can't control this thing. And then third is that it feels like it's going to last forever. The sustainability piece. And so we call that a dangerous trio for stress. It makes us sense danger around the clock. It keeps us vigilant. And I think when you couple that with resource depletion, and what I mean by resource depletion is, you know, you're not necessarily eating as healthy as you might normally or could. Your sleep patterns may be off. You're not getting in that exercise that you maybe want or need. Oftentimes our worst selves come out. So you see this on the news where people were spraying people and gargling corks and panic buying, saying mean or hurtful things to our partners. And I think importantly, when we're getting a lot of mixed messages and inaccurate information, it often makes us engage in catastrophic thinking. And the example, actually, both Robin is she could go on and on forever about flying, because Robin hadn't flown in a long time, and we flew together, and brings me traumatic memories. Thank you, Robin, for the first time we flew together.
You're welcome.
Empathy coupled with like, what am I doing with my life flying with her? But for
Well,
myself, for myself, you know, no, I don't know how anybody, like some people, I guess, like turbulence, but for me, it drives me out of my mind. It makes me think plane's going to crash. It's raining. It's shaking. And then I got information from my cousin, who is a pilot, and he's like, Mark, didn't you know, like, there's never been a crash because of turbulence? Huh? I was like, really? He's like, no, like, it's just air, just bubbles. Like, the plane just drives through it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah. So you got nothing to worry about. So now when, you know, up in the air and it shakes or there's rain or whatever the case is, I have accurate information from which to have, you know, to shift my thinking. And I say, Mark, you know this. Your cousin told you. He's been a pilot for 25 years. There's never been an accident because of turbulence. Oh, okay, now I can settle. So this is an idea of what we're going to get into today. around how our brains oftentimes make up stories when we don't have accurate information, which makes it difficult for us to regulate. And also why we want to be super careful about the information that we expose our children to. And lastly, for me right now is, I don't know about you, but emotion regulation has been difficult. Um, my fuse um, is really short. Um, it's like mealtime, cleanup time, dog time. Are you feeding the dogs? Why are you feeding the dogs too much? They're going to get sick. They're going to, it's like, it's pretty endless. Worrying about the future. Um, so I think in many ways, these webinars are like therapy for me, reminding myself, around why I need to move from, these oftentimes unhelpful strategies to the helpful ones. And maybe some of you, um, any honesty in the house around the use of these unhelpful strategies? Can anybody at least commiserate with me in terms of their use of unhelpful strategies? Okay, good.
Did you see
Rumination.
the one about the kids writing on the floor with green pens as they were listening to the webinar?
I did see that. Just make sure they're dry erase, please. All right, Robin, please.
Thank you. So we're here with you today because we know that how we are feeling is out of balance. And many, if not most of us, are spending 70 to 80% of our days in the red and blue. And I know that the days that I spend a lot of time watching the news and listening to the news, I'm in the red and blue. It's pretty hard not to be, given our current circumstances, given as Marc said, the mixed information at times, but also very sad news about the illness and death and amount of time that we're spending caretaking and not knowing when that's going to end. And while it's not realistic to be in the green and yellow all of the time, we do want to shift that balance. I know for myself, I set the intention every day to spend more time being grateful. I set the intention every day to really appreciate that. I just got married right before the coronavirus took over our world, and we are having a different kind of honeymoon than we expected, spending all of our time together, and most of the time it's terrific, except for the moments where it's not. But I'm really setting intention every day to appreciate my husband, to appreciate that my family is well right now, and that I have a very fulfilling job, like spending today with you, helping you learn more about regulating your emotions and your children's emotions. So even though we want to move to the yellow and green so that we can be a little bit more balanced, and we're going to spend today talking to you about that, first, we need to give ourselves the permission to feel. Not only ourselves, but our loved ones too. So Marc wrote a whole book about the permission, called The Permission to Feel, about the permission to feel and how to get there, and the work that we do at the center, and how he got to the place in his life where he gave himself through someone else giving him the permission to feel first, the permission to feel. So what does it mean to you? What does that phrase mean, the permission to feel? Tell us, please. And Nikki, help us hear what people are saying.
No shame in feeling, embrace your emotions. Feel your feelings, don't bury them. Practice self-compassion. Express your emotions, acknowledge them. Take time to process your emotions. Don't feel guilty about what you feel. Label your emotions. Don't judge your emotions. Be authentic. Allow for your feelings. Be self-aware.
So many of you have very definite ideas about what it means to give yourself and others the permission to feel. So here's a question that will take you perhaps back into your childhood or back somewhere in your life. Who gave you the permission to feel? I know for Marc, because we've talked about it, he's written about it, and he speaks about it very often. His Uncle Marvin was the first person to give him the permission to feel. I had the joy of knowing Uncle Marvin, who was this incredibly charismatic guy with a twinkle in his eye, and the biggest heart in the world. And he was the first person to ask Marc, who then as a teenager was having a tough time, Marc, how do you feel? And create that container, create that safe space for Marc to tell him. Who was that person for you, if you were so lucky as to have that person? Somebody said it was you, Marc.
Very sweet. I appreciate that.
Other people are saying professors, therapists, someone gave themselves the permission to feel. How beautiful. Parents.
You know, one thing I just want to add is that not everybody has that Uncle Marvin, you
Yes.
know, and I was blessed to have had that adult in my life. My parents were good people, but they just didn't have that sense of a compassion around emotion like Uncle Marvin did. I'm just reminded, Robin, a couple of months ago when I had that opportunity to meet Jane Fonda, the actress, you know, and I asked her this question and she said, I didn't have an Uncle Marvin. You know, just, I just read books and escaped and learned. That was her way of, you know, giving herself the permission to feel.
That's beautiful. I didn't have an adult Uncle Marvin, but my best friends in junior high school were my Uncle Marvin. And it's where I really learned to bring my feelings and have them accepted and met with empathy. So think about, what were the characteristics of that person if you did have an Uncle Marvin in your life? What were the characteristics of the person who gave you the permission to feel? And if you did not have an Uncle Marvin, what are the characteristics you want to be as you are the Uncle Marvin for other people?
Nikki, would you mind sharing some of these words? They look really great.
Sure. Open-minded, empathetic, sensitive, open, available, not judging, honest, confident, caring, loving, warm, supportive, compassionate, authentic.
Love it. Thank you.
So just leaving this slide again, a reminder that whether you had an Uncle Marvin or not, your kids are looking to you to be that person who can give them the permission to feel. And many people in your life will be looking to you. So you always have that opportunity every day.
Thank you, Robin.
Our vision at the center is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier, more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And today, we're going to ask you to think about using the power of your emotions to help you be the best possible self as a parent you can be, the best possible caregiver you can be. And why is this all important? Why is it important to be able to use the power of our emotions for ourselves and for other people? Well, we know that emotions matter for 5 important areas of life. And today, as we're talking about anxiety and stress and frustration and sadness, we know that those emotions very definitely impact our ability to focus, make decisions, have positive relationships. And just using some examples from real life, both for your children and for yourself, think about it in your own life. I know in mine, if my children are upset, they have, even though they're adults, they're still children in my eyes. They're not listening to this webinar, so that's a good thing. They will have trouble paying attention. My son is still in graduate school, my daughter as well, and if something emotional is going on with one of their friends or a romantic relationship, it's hard to pay attention. Think about it for yourself. When you're having a fight with someone, it's hard to pay attention. Think about your child who's maybe living with you at home right now, and many children are at home with their parents. When daddy wants one thing and mommy wants another thing and grandma wants a third thing, and you're being pressed to make a decision, weighing in everybody's feelings, how hard is it? So hard to come to your own decision, to think clearly. And if you're grumpy all day long, whether you're a child or an adult, it's going to impact the quality of relationships you have that day, maybe even that week, if your grumpiness lasts for the whole week. And we all know what happens if we have stomach aches for days in a row, or headaches, or tension, or you're down blue for days in a row, can really cause serious depression. or if you're anxious in an ongoing way, can really work on your organs, physical organs, and your state of mind. Your long-term mental health is impacted in a very negative way if you're handling stress in an ongoing way. And your performance and creativity also impacted by the stress we're living every single day. Think about it. How willing are you to take a risk when you're tense, when you're anxious? How willing might your child be to take a risk if they're scared they're going to be criticized or judged or put down for the risk? And if you can't take a risk, you can't be creative. And if you can't deal with frustration along the way, and we all have it, you can't be creative. You can't perform at your best. So emotions matter for all of these reasons. And stress and anxiety that we're living right now is impacting attention, decision-making, relationship quality, physical and mental health, and performance and creativity. And what can we do about that? We have skills. So as Marc said, our center is a center that distributes, disseminates, and embraces the skills, attitudes, mindsets of recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions, the skills of emotional intelligence. And we're always thinking about ourselves and others, recognizing emotions in ourselves and others, understanding the causes of our emotions and the consequences, labeling, expressing, and today's focus is regulating emotions.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So, as Robin said, the skill that we're going to focus on today is primarily emotion management, and we're going to define it as the thoughts and the actions that we use to prevent unwanted emotions. Think about that. You can anticipate that you might feel anxious or anticipate that you might be frustrated or irritable with someone and strategize in advance so as to not have the feeling or to reduce the impact of the feeling. You might reduce an emotion, like right now, if you're getting upset or angry or frustrated, you have to down-regulate a little bit. You might want to initiate a feeling, meaning like at dinner tonight, you might say, we're going to have some joy, and just think about infusing an emotion. You might want to maintain it, or you might just want to boost feelings. Importantly, from the perspective of emotional intelligence, all the strategies that we use to regulate are in the service of having greater well-being, building relationships, making sound decisions, and achieving our goals, all the things that Robin mentioned a little while ago. There are, we call the big seven now in terms of emotion regulation strategies. We're going to focus today not on these so much. These are the ones that you can watch our previous webinars to learn about, where we went through in a lot of detail how we manage our physiology and self-care and healthy relationships. We're going to weave these ideas into this component of co-regulation today. So earlier we focused on the adults having the skills to use helpful emotion management strategies. Today, we're going to talk about that back and forth between parent, child, teacher, student, even couples for that matter, although Robin and I will do one specifically on relationships later. And there are 4 steps that we're going to focus on today. The first is going to be setting yourself up for success. The second is going to be what we're going to call explore. The third is strategize, and the fourth is follow up. So Robin, take us through step 1. You're on mute.
I am. No more sirens. Okay. So setting yourself up for success is about considering, even before you go into the conversation, what's the best time and place to have a conversation. Considering whether you're tired or hungry, and importantly, are you going to have privacy, or is everybody going to be interrupting you, the everybody being you're living with, or your telephone, your cell phone. Be aware of what you're doing beforehand and what you might be bringing to the situation. How are you feeling? Remember to pause, breathe, and check in with your own feelings first, because whatever you're bringing to the situation is going to show up in your nonverbals. So if I've just had an argument with someone on the phone and then I walk into the kitchen to have a conversation with my husband, talk to him about something that's really important, I'm bringing that conversation with me unless I've come to some closure or I've paused first to bring myself back to to presence, to bring myself back to a place where I'm calm. Because I want to be in a calm state before I say anything or do anything, especially with your children when you're trying to co-regulate, but even with a grown-up. Because you are the role model. You are your child's first and best teacher. So it's incumbent upon you to activate your best self. And for those of you who know our work, you've thought about your best self. Many of you thought about your best self for the first time in doing work with us. Some of you may not know what a best self is. You've never really had the time or taken the time to think about what does it mean for me to be my best, most ideal self. So take that moment now and think about 2 or 3 words that you would use to describe your best self in the role of parent or caregiver. And share those words with us.
Nikki, would you like to read some?
Sure. Fully present, patient, understanding, open, compassionate, caring, optimistic, good listener, thoughtful, supportive, attentive. A lot of the same things. Yeah.
Thank you. So for me, I would say loving and compassionate would be the first 2 words that come to mind. And part of being a best self is also considering how you want your children to see you, to talk about you, and to experience you as a parent or a caregiver. So for example, when my kids were little, it was very important to me that my kids saw me as being strict. Because I wanted the room to be able to set limits and have that be part of my identity, have them see me as that person too. Of course, I also wanted them to see me as loving, which is part of my ideal. But the way you want to be experienced and talked about may be a little bit the same or a little bit different. How do you want your children or your grandchildren or your nieces and nephews or the people you take care of, your students, to see you and experience you as a caregiver or a parent? Loving is one.
Thank you, Robin.
Trusting. So leading with compassion and empathy. Step 2, exploring. Step 1, we're setting ourselves up for the conversation and we're being the role model. But leading with compassion and empathy is the way we're going to be able to explore with empathy. Sorry, my screen just did a strange thing. Knowing that the mere presence, our mere presence, will help your child to regulate. You want to be able to approach kids with a welcoming facial expression and a calm voice. And you can practice that at any time. Just modulate your voice. Slow down the cadence. Notice the tone. We also want very deeply to be an emotion scientist, not an emotion judge. As an emotion scientist, we're using gentle exploration. We're curious, we're interested, we're open. You want to give your child undivided attention. Look at them. Orient your body towards them if at all possible. And listen for their story. Validate their emotions. Let them know that anything they feel is okay, and you understand, and you're there for them. Avoid telling your child what they're feeling. Rather, find out how they're actually feeling. Ask them, are you angry? If they look angry, hey, you look upset, perhaps you look angry. Are you? Don't assume. And here on the left, my left, an emotion scientist, it's the list that follows. I want to be that person, accepting all emotions as information, curious and reflective, having a growth mindset. I don't want to be the emotion judge, viewing emotions as weak, or seeing what somebody's feeling as permanently fixed. Don't want to be critical. It happens that I am sometimes. I am critical inadvertently. And I'll take a step back and think, wait a minute, I want to be the emotion scientist. I am an emotion scientist for the most part. Thinking about who you are with your children, wonder if you could take a minute and think about who your parents were, who your caregivers were for you. Did you grow up in a home where there were emotion scientists asking you about your feelings, being curious, being in learner mode with you, or did you grow up with emotion judges? Sadly, many of us have grown up with emotion judges. It just wasn't the education for people to understand otherwise and the impact. But having grown up with emotion judges, I did, makes me all the more eager to be committed to be an emotion scientist every single day.
Thank you, Robin. So we're going to jump into a case study now. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Adrian was doing homework online with a group of students at the kitchen table. She slammed her computer, she pushed it into the middle of the table, and then ran towards her bedroom crying. Seeing this, her dad called after her. And when she turned around, she snapped and said, "What? I hate school. This sucks." So what do you think Adrian is feeling? So many people are saying frustration, frustrated. Somebody said maybe hurt, angry, angry covering it up. So it would seem so because she had a loud voice, she was cursing, she was impatient, but actually there was a backstory. The backstory was that when Adrian was working online with her friends, they were making fun of her, saying, "Hey, look at her hair. Like, who dressed her today?" And rolling their eyes, she felt humiliated or something else. And what do we know when we listen to not only what happened, but hear the backstory? We know that behavior does not equal emotion. Just because somebody slams the door, just because she ran angrily, seemingly angrily into her bedroom, doesn't mean that that's what she was feeling. In order to know what somebody's feeling, you must be the compassionate emotion scientist. You must use ruler questions and ruler skills, and we're going to get to the questions in a few minutes. You have to, yes, ask questions. People are chiming in now. Ask questions. Ask, what are you feeling? What happened? Doesn't seem like you. Tell me more. Next slide.
So we're going to play a game now where you get to be the emotion scientists. We're going to look at your understanding of these different emotions. So we're going to just go through this quickly because of time, and we want to jump and make sure we get through our whole webinar. Take a moment. What is the underlying cause of anger? What do you think causes people to feel anger? People are saying fear or anxiety, injustice, hurt, shame, getting hurt, unfairness, sadness, lack of control. You can see we've got a lot of perceptions here of what it means to feel angry. How about fear? Let's jump right into fear. What's the underlying cause of fear? Pain, sense of safety, lack of control, betrayal, unknown, uncertainty, stress, survival. How about disappointment? Let's jump into disappointment. What makes us feel disappointed? Unmet expectations, failure. Okay. So we asked about fear earlier. What about anxiety? What's different about anxiety than fear? And why not add overwhelmed? How do you differentiate fear from anxiety from overwhelm? Lots of different ideas here. Lack of control, unknowns, anticipation of future, lack of control, burdensome, no control of the situation. Let's go with the last two. What's jealousy about? why do we feel jealous? And what's different from envy? Insecurity is when we feel jealous. Ego. Okay. So you can see here that, each of us has, what we might call um, our own definition, of these emotions. And while each of us experiences these emotions in a different way, we do want to have a common definition. And the reason why that's important is because we want to use words ourselves to describe our feelings, but we also want to be able to support our children. And one thing that we say is that if we don't have a common understanding of feeling, it's going to be really hard to be that emotion scientist, that coach. Because if my kid is yelling, I hate you because I can't go to my friend's house today, um, you may think they're angry, but the real feeling is disappointment because they had an expectation they were going to be able to go, but they're acting out like the previous example as if they're angry. We get activated by that anger. We punish for that anger, or we regulate the anger, when really what we want to do is teach our child the feeling of disappointment, that they had a goal which was not met and it was legitimate. Like, we're not allowed to go. So if it were a complete injustice, yes, it would be anger. But in this example, it would really be disappointment, and really helping kids get granular in their understanding of emotion so you can support them in regulating it. And that leads us to step 3, which is strategize. Robin, do you want to take us through this?
Right. Sorry, I was muted. Silence. When you're coaching your child, you're using a range of thought and action strategies, both to help coach them through and with their the emotions they're having, and also to help them move towards problem solving if something's actually happened that they want to have a solve for. So many strategies that you can use with them and teach them. Mindful breathing is one of our favorites and one of the most well-researched. Positive self-talk that Marc is going to tell you a little bit more about in a minute, and reframing a situation. So uh, if one of your children is doing a project and with someone, and that person doesn't get their part in on time, rather than um, listening to them say, well, she's so stupid, I can't believe it, she's so lazy, why didn't she help me? Perhaps you can help them reappraise the situation. Like, gee, maybe there was something going on in her house. Maybe she just didn't get it. Let's ask, let's see what happened. So telling a different story about what's happened in their life that has caused them some unpleasant feeling. Again, action strategies: take a walk, exercise, eat a snack, do something fun. All of those things you can do with your children. I've been cooking a lot more, whether before COVID, I would invite my kids over and we would cook together. That's really wonderful. And that's lingered for me, so that now I'm cooking not just with young people when we invite them over for dinner, but with my husband. Solving problems creatively. Can't be creative unless you're using the skills of emotional intelligence to free you up and to help you manage feelings that come along. But being creative with your child is a fun activity. And the more you can generate different solutions, different strategies, the more choices your child has. Because you don't want to tell your child what strategy they should use. The strategy that might work best for you, both about calming down and about attending to the situation, might not be the strategy that's going to work best for your child. So you want to problem solve. All strategies are permitted in my home, at least if people are allowed to talk about them. And in the moment of problem solving, you want to work on the immediate short-term strategy. You want to consider the obstacles, then plan for it, and support whatever your child chooses to do.
Thank you, Robin. So today we're going to focus on the cognitive strategies of self-talk and reappraisal. These are both highly researched strategies that have evidence for their effectiveness, which is why we're sharing them. And the positive self-talk, you've all heard of it. It's when we were kids. It's, I think I can, I think I can. But what research shows is that oftentimes the I is hard to acknowledge when we're activated, when we're feeling strong emotions, that sometimes it really helps us to say our name. So for example, when I'm, freaking out, with stress, and I know from my own research and from being in the field for so long that emotions are ephemeral, I have a go-to phrase, which is, Marc, this feeling is impermanent. You've had anxiety your whole life. You've had plenty of a relationship with your anxiety, but it's not there all the time. It comes and it goes, just like other things in life. And so, can you just accept the fact that right now it's a hard feeling, but it will be going away probably overnight? And so, that's my phrase. You have to find the phrase that works for you. Your children have to find the phrases that work for them. Here's an example. I'm never going to see my friends again, and helping our child see, Jenny, to challenge that thought. Is that really true? Right? Of course you are. Positive reappraisal, looking at the situation through a different lens. This is really interesting because it involves a lot of creativity. It's changing the story. So for example, from I'm never going to make it at being home for so long to, okay, think about it. You've got the opportunity to start that project you always wanted to read, or the book you got last month. The point here is that the reappraisal strategy is asking questions to help ourselves and our kids see the situation through another lens and to challenge the thinking. Now, what we find is that it's often hard to do it. I don't know about you, but when I'm, activated, and sometimes it's just hard for me to find that strategy. And another interesting tidbit about research is that sometimes it's helpful to ask your child, or even yourself, think about the advice you would give somebody else. So for example, right, you can imagine you're Adrian's parent. Now she's feeling embarrassed and humiliated about the Zoom meeting, right? You're trying the rule of questions, and she's struggling to come up with strategies. Can you just ask her to consider what she might say to a friend, once she's been deactivated or calm? And ultimately, the goal is to try to apply that to the self. So let me give you a real world example. I've had the privilege of getting emails from literally thousands of people who've read my book. One mom sent me a note that was really cute. She said that this technique really works well. I said, well, she wrote me the whole thing. I didn't say anything because I didn't get to talk to her. And she wrote me this whole story about how she was in the car with her 7-year-old son. He was really anxious about going to the dentist, and he was making a fit about it. And the mother was like, I don't know what to do. I can't think of anything. And so she goes, I'm going to try that strategy. And she goes, to her son, honey, imagine your best friend was going to the dentist and feeling this anxious. What would you encourage him to think about? What would you say to him? What advice might you give him in obviously the adult developmental language? And the boy, she said, came up with like 5 things. Like, well, I would tell him your teeth are going to be this way and it's not going to be so bad. Don't worry about it. And then you're going to go to whatever do afterwards. And the mom then said to her son, honey, that's amazing. All those things you came up with. Do you think you might be able to tell yourself those things to help you feel less anxious? And the boy paused. And then he looked at his mom through the rearview mirror and he goes, Mom, you're a genius. So don't underestimate the power of not having to be the knower and be the learner, right? You don't have to know everything. Your children are brilliant. Give them the opportunity to be creative and think through the strategies. And one way to do that is to distance themselves from it and ask the questions. So when we talk about these ruler questions, you can see here, recognizing emotions. You're asking questions like, I noticed a change in your body or in your tone of voice. Looks like you might be feeling, are you? Sometimes people have more than one feeling at a time. What happened? What were you doing right before you came inside? Has there been another time that you felt this way? Labeling emotions. What might be the feeling? Let's try to think of the specific word together. Do you think it might be this, or do you think it might be that? And you're going to get these questions, by the way. Expressing emotion. Would you like to talk about it now, or do you need some space? Is there anything I can do? Right? Be that Uncle Marvin. Create the space. Regulating. Maybe take a deep breath, honey. Let's take a walk over here. What can I do to support you right now? Let's try thinking this way. What might you say to your friend? Do you want to go for a walk? So these are all mostly open-ended questions, where you just have to be that compassionate emotion scientist, not the judge or the knower.
Someone said, be a guide. I think it's a wonderful way to think about it. You're a coach, you're a guide, and you're trusting that your child will know what to do when you bring them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a few last things about these strategies. One is that all strategies are specific to the emotion. Not all emotions are created equal. For me, like anger right now is pretty easy for me to manage. I always say the 90s were my anger years. Now I'm in the overwhelmed state of my life and I'm dealing with that. So that's a more challenging one for me. Your children will have that same potentially challenge, that some emotions may be more difficult for them. Same for you. They're specific to the person. Think about that. Strategies are rooted in our personalities, our family background, our culture. This is why you don't have to be the knower, just be in that learner mode. They're specific to the situation or relationship. Some of us are better at regulating with certain people. Like with Robin, I'm terrible at regulating, but with all other people I work with, I'm very good at regulating. That was a joke. And finally, there's no criterion of correctness. Think about that. It's not like one form of self-talk or the one thing that you say to yourself. It's what works for you in supporting you and having greater well-being. It's what works for your child. So just be that explorer, that scientist who's discovering the things that work and use them. Our final step, Robin.
Thanks, Mark. So we want to remember always to follow up. Remember that this work is the journey of a lifetime, and history often repeats itself. You want to check in with your child regularly. Things will happen and they'll happen again, and every single time, your child needs to know that you'll be there to check in with them. Ask how they're feeling. Ask how they're managing the situation they were struggling with. Find out about your child's successes and challenges with strategies they might have learned in that particular situation or another one at a former point in history. Reinforce the benefits, and this is really important, about talking about things in a calm way. Tell them it's really wonderful that you guys are able to talk things through. It's really important that you enjoy it too. Praise them for the successes they have in all the things that they have worked out well. Accept the challenges and accept their failure. When they tell you, I failed at that, okay, that's okay. Let's talk about how we can work together to think about additional strategies. And again, like we said many times in this presentation, be the learner, not the knower. Guide them, facilitate them, bring them to the point where they can think, well, maybe this didn't work out so well because. And in doing all these things, in talking through this and following up, you're building them, you're building with them, you're helping them build the habit of using helpful strategies and reflecting on how important they are.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap up our time together, and then we'll stay over for a good 5 minutes or so to answer some questions. And if you have to leave, it's completely understandable. Rob and I always get overly excited about doing this, and we tend to go a little longer than we anticipated. So we apologize if you have to get off right now for other meetings, but we will stay on for about 5 or 10 minutes in just a moment. So as you think about the 4 steps we shared today to support you and helping your children manage their emotions more effectively, right? Think about those. Step 1, setting yourself up for success, explore, strategize, follow up. What from today's webinar resonates the most with you? Can you just share that with us? What from today's webinar, what's your pearl from today? What's the one thing that you're thinking about?
Be the learner.
Thank you.
reappraisal, setting an intention every day to be grateful. All emotions are okay. Be a learner, not a knower. Let your child be the expert. Don't tell children what they're feeling, help them to find out. Activate your best self. Be the model. Follow children's
Wonderful.
lead.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki.
So I'm going to ask you all to set an intention right now to apply these ideas that you've come up with on your own, that you're going to be your best self, that you're going to be the learner, not the knower. Can you just create that intention right now? And I want you to imagine what will be different for you, for your children, for your relationship, for your health, as a result of using this new strategy of being your best self, of being the learner, not the knower. What do you notice? If you start applying this today, what will be different? Nikki, do you want to read a few of these off?
Sure. I'll be listening more and fixing less.
Hmm.
I'll be a scientist, remain humble, I'll receive more respect from others, be more open to listening, less battles with my child. I'm more than just one emotion, less shouting, calming and open, less stress.
Thank you. And as you know, I do live typo fixing. What might get in the way, right? How can you plan better? So, one thing I'm reminded of is a mom who said, I really want to be my best self in the morning with my kids because it's really the time to set the goal for the day. But yet she's not getting enough sleep. So she's waking up exhausted. So sometimes, we set the intention of having, being our best self, but you have to think about the barriers to that as well. And lastly, what we want to say is please give yourself and your children the permission to feel all emotions. Remember that emotion regulation is not about not feeling, right? It's not about repressing or suppressing. It's about accepting all emotions and using them wisely. Going to strive to be an emotion scientist, not an emotion judge, and try to be that Uncle Marvin for your child and for other people. And Robin, do you want to do the last three?
I'd love to, thank you. So appreciate that developing emotion regulation skills, as we said, is the work of a lifetime. It takes considerable effort. It's way harder than learning a math skill. The skills are dynamic. They're happening in real time between you and others, and they're disruptive. The emotions that drive your need for the skills are disruptive. So things are going on all the time that require practice and effort. Be the role model. If you fail, be open to apologizing, forgiving yourself, and repairing. If you're looking to somebody else to model behavior for maybe your older child, for your younger child, and they fail, be open to asking them to apologize, forgive them, and encourage repairing and seeking help if necessary. And never give up. Be compassionate to yourself. We always say, please include yourself in the circle of people you give care and compassion to. And be compassionate, especially to your children. They deserve it. And everyone's health and wellness needs to be your priority.
And on that note, we just want to thank you for your time. And if you um, are interested, some people asked about my book. It's called Permission to Feel. Robin's book, which came out a couple of years ago, is called The Gaslight Effect. If you're interested in apps, you can check out our Mood Meter app. If you are an educator and want to learn more about Ruler, please go to rulerapproach.org. And we also have free resources. Nikki, do you want to just share a little bit about the resources that we have available?
Sure. So if you go to rulerapproach.org, at the top, there's a banner that links you to a separate web page that's specific to this whole situation with COVID and distance learning. And on that web page, you'll see a link to all of our recorded webinars that we've offered, which we've offered several, and we have some more coming up. So you'll see an option to sign up for others there. We also have some downloadable print resources, some different guides, and some different tips for families, educators, and leaders. And we continue to add to that about every week. So you can check back.
Thank you, Nikki. And so we have about 5 minutes. I know there's still a couple hundred people on. Nikki, you had a few questions that you were saving for us, so maybe we'll start with those.
Sure. So one question that came up in a couple of different ways is what do we do when we're trying to be empathic and compassionate, but time is short? And related to that, 'cause I think they're pretty related, but slightly different, what are the strategies for kind of telling someone how we need to come back to this at a later time when it's just too heated or too explosive? So they're similar but different.
Do you want to take the first one, Robin?
Sure. So I'm thinking about times certainly where I've been in that position where I've wanted to let my kids know or my nieces and nephews know that I cared about what was going on and could feel their upset. And yet we still had to get out of the house or we still had to do something else. And I would say that. So, first, again, bringing yourself to a place of calm, set yourself up for the conversation because you know if you're tense and you're sitting there clenching your fists as you're talking to them or clenching your teeth, we've got to get out of here. I care about you. It's not really going to work out that well because that's what you'll be communicating. But if you can bring yourself to presence, to calm, and share with them, I really want to listen to this. I really feel your feelings. Help help us think about the next best time we can talk about it. And then involving them, one, helping them use their thinking skills at a time where they're full of feelings will help to deactivate the feelings immediately. And helping them think about a time where you're going to be together will be um, a calming element in that moment. Remember that it won't always work, but if you try for excellence and not perfection, I think that it'll help a lot to ask them to join you in thinking about that next time, something to look forward to, while they know that you've joined them in what they're feeling and that you care. Mark, will you add to that, please?
No, I think what you just said was great. And what I'll add is the second thing that Mickey asked, which is about like sometimes we all need space. And, my partner calls it a mega moment. You know, like, like I cannot think clearly right now. Like I am so activated and anything that comes out of my mouth is not going to be helpful. And so what that means, right, is that we have to give ourselves the permission to pause, the permission to take a step back, the permission to say something like, I'm really upset right now. I want to work through it. Now's not the time. I need a few minutes to get my thoughts together. So just give yourself, you don't have to be the expert in the moment, right? You can let people know, I need time to process. Some people like me, I don't like to process. I like to like go for it. And other people, who have different personalities and temperaments may need more time to process. So just try that out. Like if you feel overwhelmed and you're going to like go to say something that you're going to regret, just say, instead of anything, just say, I need a little space. I'm going to take a step back. And then, once you've been deactivated, then you can go in and have that conversation.
Mark, I'll add to that something that I think can be helpful for couples or family members. A patient of mine was telling me that she and her sister had a huge fight during this close living quarters and or situation. And as they were parting and going off to their bedrooms that night, uh, she turned to her sister and said, not I need space, but our relationship needs space.
Mm.
Our relationship needs space. I can you think can we make an agreement to talk about this tomorrow morning? And her sister told her that she was so grateful for that because she didn't know how angry the first sister was. And it just reminded her that they really were on the same family team and that it
Mm-hmm.
was going to be okay the next day and they were still going to be sisters the next day. So reminding somebody that there's a container that holds that relationship, I think is a wonderful gift as well.
Love it.
Great. I
Let
have
me,
another
oh,
interesting.
go ahead, Nikki.
Does the belief that he, she, so someone else or something else made me feel a certain way diminish our ability for self-regulation?
Well, we want to, I mean, this is getting into more the psychology of emotion here, which is interesting and important. You know, in the element of truth, right? No one makes you feel something, right? You create your own feelings based on the way you perceive the world. And I think that's a very important thing to realize, that part of helping us to regulate is to shift the way we appraise things sometimes. Um, so there's no excuse for not using helpful strategies, right? Once you've learned them, they just take a lot of practice. And I think relatedly, this one comment I see here is that when I give myself space, I tend to ruminate and, perseverate. And understandable. That's where, that self-talk strategy can come to play. That's where that technique that Rob and I share with you, which is like, Mark, like, I can't take it anymore. Like, now that I always joke about this. This is why I always say the breathing is insufficient, right? Because people say, just take a breath. And I'm like, okay, now even clearer why I hate you. So I hear you on that. So that means you got to give yourself that space, but also really challenge your thinking. Like, is this helpful? Is this going over this 5,000 times really going to help me have better well-being and solve the problem? Probably not. Okay. So what would I tell my best friend to do? How would I suggest my best friend think about that? Do you see what I'm getting at here? It's like you've got to just um, commit to trying out the more helpful ways of strategizing.
I'd like to add to that, Mark. So I think that that's something that I hear very often is, well, but if she didn't do that, I wouldn't be feeling this way. If they didn't make me feel that way, but the idea is that yes, it's true that um, if your partner didn't, or your child didn't throw your computer on the floor, you wouldn't have had the occasion to be upset. So in that situation, you were triggered by what happened, but your child or the event didn't make you have that feeling. You had that feeling as a reaction to it. And then, as Mark said, it's up to you what you do with that feeling. So your feelings happen. They come, as we say, unbidden in reaction to something you're thinking about or something that happens outside of you. But you always have a choice about how you're going to respond. And I would say something more about the appraisal as well. And if you, Mark, I'm sure you and the other people on the webinar who know me will know that I'm going to say that there's a slippery slope with reappraisal as well. That if you are with your family member or an adult and you're constantly finding that you're reappraising their behavior so that you can experience a different kind of feeling rather than being angry or blaming, that you might have a larger conversation that needs to be had about the relationship and how it's going. It might not be as smooth as you once thought it was, or as easy to navigate.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to being that emotion scientist, around all of your strategies, that we have to sometimes take a step back and say, is this strategy working to support my well-being, the building of positive relationships, the making of sound decisions? And we have to go, just because we want to be respectful of all of your time, and honored to be with all of you today. And may you all apply these strategies to your own lives and to the lives of those that you love and care for. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Thanks so much, Robin and Mark, and everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
Bye bye now.
Bye.